I'm Lotta Minkovsky. Welcome back to HuffPost Live. Ladies and gentlemen, prepare for the era of male birth control. Researchers at Parsimus Foundation are one step closer to changing the face of reproductive medicine with their creation of vasalgel, a non-hormonal form of male birth control. Unlike the pill, it would be a one-time, single treatment dosage. Now, human trials begin in 2015, and if all goes well, the product will be hitting the market by 2017. Now, a development like this would be huge. So here to discuss how this could change our society, we're joined by Elaine Listener, the executive director of the Parsimus Foundation, Nikki Glaudeman, the co-editor at ravishly.com, who wrote the following blog called The Male Birth Revolution May Be Upon Us, But Are Men on Board? And Gareth Kales, who says that he is willing to use male birth control. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
Now, Elaine, why don't we start with you and tell us everything that you know at this point about vasalgel. How does it work? We know that at this point there has been testing in baboons, and how effective has it been?
Yeah, so everything we know in 20 words or less after 10 or 15 years of research. So this has been a long time in the works, and it is a long-acting male contraceptive injection that goes in the tube that the sperm swim through. So it's not hormones circulating through your whole body. It mostly blocks the tube that the sperm swim through, the same tube that would be cut for a vasectomy. But the thing that's different about this is, one, it seems to let some pressure off because fluid actually can get through this gel. And also, two, it may be reversible, which is what makes it exciting, because if it's just sort of a gel vasectomy, it's not that big a deal. So
let me interrupt you for one moment. So when you say it may be reversible, this is just a possibility, right? So at this point, you don't know.
So it's a strong possibility. It's been reversed in rabbit studies, and we're about to do reversals in baboon studies that we've been fundraising and crowdfunding for. And there is a similar contraceptive in India. It's not the same, but similar, called Rysug. And they have been able to reverse that in monkeys and a few humans as well. So there's a good track record, but we can't obviously promise anything until we know. And right now we're fundraising for the trials, the last animal trials, and then the first clinical trials, which would be for men who are finished having kids. But then once reversals are done on those, when those first men choose reversal, then we can start saying more. Anyway, so basically all we can say right now is it's more reversible than vasectomy. We know we can get sperm flowing again, but can't promise a baby 10 years from now. So,
got it.
That's
and I think that would be, that's a key issue here as to whether or not we really think that something like vasalgel would be able to replace female birth control, because the whole point is that you can stop taking the pill or another method of birth control when you are ready to have children. And at this point, do you have any idea how much something like this would cost?
So it should not be like IUDs, where it costs a week or two's wages or more than a flat screen TV. It is a social venture, meaning we have to balance affordability but also sustainability for the social venture that's doing the development. It's a multi-million-dollar project, but it shouldn't cost $800 like the Mirena IUD. That's just insane. And it should be affordable for everybody.
Yeah, and at the same time, if you think about a one-time deal versus women having to pay for birth control every single month, you wonder if the numbers really start to even out there. So, Nikki, you wrote this blog, I have it pulled up again, too, that the revolution of male birth control may be upon us, but are men on board? We will get to Gareth in a moment, who is a man who would be on board. But what are your biggest concerns when you hear about this?
I just think that, fertility management has been the woman's responsibility for such a long time. And with the birth control pill, it's been over 50 years that we've been taking that. It's biologically, from that standpoint and that imperative, it's the female's role. I don't see it happening overnight that men are going to all jump on board, because it's so deeply entrenched that it's the female's duty or the female's job. I don't think that's necessarily the right way to look at it, but I think that it's going to be hard to reverse that kind of social trend.
I think that's a very good point, right? Men have been spoiled up until this point. Let's just be honest, because the responsibility and the burden has all fallen onto women. But we have some open-minded gentlemen. Chris L., one of our viewers, says, I wouldn't have a problem using it. The burden of contraception, among other things, should be more egalitarian. I certainly support that. And Gareth, tell us about yourself. Why would you be willing to use male birth control?
Well, I think he summed it up. I think that the responsibility has been on women for so long. It hasn't been fair. And frankly, I mean, if you could have told me 5 years ago, hey, it's going to take 15 minutes and it's impossible for you to have kids for the next 10 years, I would have said, yes, sign me up right away. Now I'm in a position where I'm engaged and I might have some kids in a few years. And so I'm thinking at this point, I might wait until I have one or two, and then I'd be completely on board at that point. If it's low cost, one time for 10 years, why wouldn't you do it at that point?
I think that's a good question. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, and I think along with, I mean, you're talking about responsibility, but the flip side of responsibility is control. And I think men have not had a lot of reproductive control with nothing in between condoms and vasectomy. And condoms are crucially important in relationships. And, everybody needs to keep using condoms for disease prevention. But what about when you've been together 6 months, 6 years, and you still want kids, but so, you're not necessarily eligible for a vasectomy or the right person for a vasectomy. What's in between there? And I'm guessing, Gareth, you might be sort of in that in-between position, which is a lot of men.
Absolutely. The vasectomy, there's just something so permanent sounding about snipping away at things. And so I think that when you have something that's potentially reversible, you go, maybe you figure out 3 years down, I really do want another kid. You've got that option at that point, where you don't really have that option if you do something very permanent like that. And also condoms, they're very effective, but they're not 100% effective, right? So having something else that is more effective is certainly a good option, I think.
Well, I want to read another comment here. This one comes from Laura Henry. She's a little more skeptical. She says, I see this as a safer, non-invasive sort of vasectomy rather than birth control as we gals know it. I do not think many men will be on board for the price or the pain of it. I'm not going to name names, but while we were preparing this segment today and we were discussing with producers, there were some gentlemen that said, we were talking about the fact that this is going to be something that would be like a shot. And immediately there were people cringing and saying they don't like the idea of it. And I think that, again, because men have been so spoiled that they haven't had to deal with the discomfort of things like birth control for so long that I think they might be scared of having to deal with some kind of pain.
Oh.
Gareth, tell us,
Come on,
how do we get men to man up?
How do you get them to man? Exactly. Just tell them to man up. If you go get a tetanus shot, your arm hurts for 3 days. This thing's probably, you tell me, Elaine, is it going to hurt for more than 10 seconds? I mean, who cares?
I mean, yeah. No, if you can handle the dentist, this is a piece of cake. If you could, yeah.
Good. But that goes to Nikki. What I think you were talking about is just that it means that we completely have to re-envision the way that we typically approach something like this. And unfortunately, birth control is something that has become something incredibly political in this country. We've seen it playing out, especially in the last year with the Hobby Lobby case that was taken to the Supreme Court, whether or not you can force employers to provide coverage for contraceptives if it goes against their religious beliefs. And so how would something like this really change the game in your view?
Well, that's one really nice thing about vasalgel is it's as far from an egg as you can get. So really it brings up the same issues that are brought up by vasectomy and that we're already dealing with vasectomy. It's just it could be a bigger group of men that it applies to. So you don't have the same issues around conception. Yeah, we have 19,000 men on the wait list waiting to hear about clinical trials at this point. So I think there's going to be, it'll never appeal to all men, and it will be a societal change. But the men that are already out there using condoms are already out there being responsible partners with their long-term partner. A lot of them are interested.
Nikki,
I do think,
Nikki, what do you think that the religious right would do with something like this?
Well, it certainly challenges a lot of what they've always argued, because for years and years and years, it's been the woman's body that's at the center of all of these political and religious debates. And so for suddenly the man's body to be at the center of it, I think that it's a very significant paradigm shift. And I don't know how they're going to deal with that. I mean, a good point that was brought up in another article written about this is that Hobby Lobby does cover vasectomies, but they don't cover, birth control. So there's already that economy that we're dealing with, and I think it's definitely challenging that.
Gareth, how do you see it? I think that there was an interesting point that was made earlier by Elaine too, in that men have had very little control over this process for so long, because women have primarily been responsible for birth control. Do you think that would change the dynamics at all in your relationship and your partnership?
Well, first of all, I think men have plenty of control. If you don't make stupid mistakes, then bad things won't happen to you. But from that point, I would agree that, yes, I think it's going to change the attitude a little bit. I think that once the option's there, once you start seeing, it's certain celebrities, they go and they do things like this, and then all of a sudden everyone goes, oh, maybe I should consider doing that. There's been a great campaign the NFL has done where a lot of the announcers have come out and talked about prostate cancer and going and getting tested and that kind of thing. So I think if you get those kinds of influencers, like, men's men, if you will, that are kind of saying this is a good idea, you should try this, then I think people might be more open to it at that point.
Now, of course, Elaine, there is always the question of the pharmaceutical industry. This is really, a giant force to be reckoned with, and so you would be taking away probably a large portion of their clientele if women no longer had to buy birth control every single month. How concerned are you about that?
Yeah, you hear the quote, actually in one of the recent articles, it said, why sell a man a flat screen TV when you can sell his partner a cable subscription every month? Or, it's kind of that same issue when you have a long-term method that very quickly the economics of it change, even if it costs a chunk at first. And I think mostly we've been under the radar for a long time. We're so small. And I mean, this is $1 multi-million dollar project, and we don't have multi-million dollars. We are crowdfunding it. We actually just got our first grant. First foundation stood up and said, we believe men have right to control their reproduction too, with reliable long-term methods, which is where things are going for women, is reliable long-term methods like IUDs. So this sort of parallel. But, I think that the concept of a contraceptive supermarket holds. I don't think it's ever going to be that all men get this. And, if 10% of men get it, 20% of men, that's going to make a big difference to those men's lives and their partners too, if their partners can get off the pill that's causing them problems or whatever. But so far, I don't see it as a plot against it. It's more just benign neglect that we're really up against tough odds raising this kind of money. Nobody's really tried to do something so scrappy before, so we're counting on.
In and of itself, if I could just interject for a moment here, is shocking to me that there is no funding that has been going towards doing this kind of research. Why isn't this something that has been prioritized earlier?
Yeah, well, for many years, people thought men weren't interested, and that was what was said. And then finally, after enough years of stories in the media and men saying, no, wait, we're a different generation. We are interested. We want some control. We want to participate. The policymakers have gotten that idea, but then along came the recession and just cut a lot of the funding. There's very little funding for contraceptive development in general. If you look, for example, at contraceptive development versus supplying AIDS drugs, the numbers are just, very little directed towards future solutions versus supplying commodities. And then very little of that goes to male methods, and most of that has gone to hormonal approaches, which we don't think, basically, if you can be more targeted and not affect the whole body, why not? So hormonal methods didn't work out super well. Some of the men had issues, and everybody's, I think, feeling a little burned since then. And Then there's the Gates Foundation, which is doing wonderful work trying to get women some more options in countries where women don't even have options. But then this falls through the cracks because, it'll help women, but it's not a woman's thing. So it falls through a lot of cracks.
Interesting. Yeah, you would have to refashion it as it's no longer a woman's issue, which is, something that I think rightly so they have been doing here in the United States, too, when talking about reproductive health. This isn't a woman's issue. This isn't an issue that affects anyone. When it comes to their sexual life and it comes to family planning. And that's what's also so exciting about vasalgel, as you mentioned, is that it's not hormonal. You think of the long list of side effects. Nikki, you go through some of them in your piece that women have to possibly deal with, like blood clots, like stroke, very serious health side effects, and symptoms here that you may face because of hormonal methods of birth control. So if you have something that's another option that doesn't have to be as serious, how great that would be. All right, well, clearly there's a lot to talk about here, and we're all very excited, but I have to cut it off there. But Elaine, Gareth, and Nikki, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now, for more information on the future of male birth control, you can check out the links in our resource well below, and stick around. There's much more coming up on HuffPost Live.